here now. So welcome everyone to this King's Business School Alumni Breakfast. My name's Kate Foreman. I'm Head of Executive Programme Development here at the Business School, so specifically work around executive education and creating a larger provision of courses for our older, more advanced, more experienced group. I'm going to just chat to you a little bit about that at the very end. But the main event and the most important thing you're here for today is the session with Dr. Gillian Brooks on developing a powerful personal brand. And I know we're all really excited to hear about this. So very quickly, just to say the format for today, Gillian's going to present for about 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. I think we've already had some questions sent through, so we'll chat in a moment about that. And please do ask your questions. We'd love to hear from you. This is also going to be recorded as well, so you will have the opportunity to watch it again on the King's Business School YouTube channel in the alumni playlist if you want to as well. But to start us off then, let me welcome Dr. Gillian Brooks, who is going to be our main event today. So she is a lecturer in strategic marketing at the Business School. Gillian holds a PhD in sociology from the University of Cambridge, and she joined King's Business School in 2020 after a postdoctoral research fellowship in marketing at Said Business School at the University of Oxford. She's trained as a sociologist, and she investigates core topics in consumer behavior, social media, and marketing strategy. And she studies these topics primarily through qualitative research methods. And very impressively, her research has been published in all sorts of places, including the Journal of Marketing, Forbes, The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Times, and Newsweek. So she's a very, very busy person. She also won the AMA Marketing Research SIG John Lehman Award and is the recipient of a Marketing Science Institute research grant. So super, super good hands that you're in today to learn about this topic. She teaches various marketing and communication courses to a wide range of audiences, so from undergraduate students to executives, and that includes the executive courses at King's Business School, which is great for us. And prior to entering academia, Gillian worked as a publicist at a global media relations firm in Toronto, in Canada. So lots and lots of experience to share with you. So today, Gillian's going to discuss her work on developing a powerful personal brand, as you've likely seen, and she's also going to share some tools for marketing yourself and your ideas and thinking about that both online and offline, which obviously is very relevant. And as we know, in the last 5 years, we've had a dramatic increase in competition for attention, and certainly COVID has framed some of that as well. So I'm sure Gillian will speak a bit about that. So just before I pass over to Gillian, just a little bit of housekeeping. What we're going to ask you to do is, if you're on Zoom watching live, you will be able to use the Q&A feature on the platform to submit your questions. So you can find that at the bottom of your screen, and then when you open it, you'll be able to write questions, and we'll sort of store those up and ask them at the end. And just to say as well that you can see everyone else's questions. So because we've got quite a few people on the call today, if you see a question that you particularly like, please do feel free to upvote it, and then we'll know that that's a particular question that you would all like answered. So if we can't get to all the questions, it just helps us with upvoting so that we can see which questions to prioritize, and then that will pop them to the top of the list. So make sure you have a scroll through and see if there's any questions there that you want to look to particularly ensure that we ask Gillian at the end. So I'm going to stop talking there, and I'm going to pass you over to Gillian and wish her a very warm welcome and let her proceed.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Kate. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully we don't lose anyone in this now regular process. Okay, share screen. Here we go. Okay, good morning. I think everyone's coming from the morning. No one's too far overseas, I think, to be in the evening. So today what I'm going to be talking about is really what you need to know about developing a powerful personal brand. As Kate mentioned earlier, in the last 5 years, there's an unbelievable need for people to grow their personal brand, and even more so in the last 2 years since COVID. How are we networking when we actually can't see people in person? And how do we actually build that brand and leverage our networks to help create this very specific professional identity when everyone's working from a variety of different locations compared to their colleagues or potential employers, So just to start with the power of brands, I just wanted to show you this. If we were in person, we would have a little, I guess, a contest, if you will, but I'm sure everyone can name these specific brands, right? Without the blinking an eye, we know exactly that we have McDonald's, Apple, Nike, Facebook, you name it. However, do you think you could actually name Are there other types of identifiers? Probably not. It's really just the power of brands that illustrates how important these symbols actually are to us. And more importantly, personal branding is something that a lot of individuals forget about, or they sort of think about it as a second task when they're doing their actual networking. They don't think about really, what do I stand for? What am I known for? How am I perceived? And that's something that we're going to work through today. So honestly, being completely honest, your personal brand is what other people say about you when you leave the room, right? It's sort of your professional reputation, good or bad, but it's the heuristic that individuals have with you. So it's that mental shortcut, that people make when they consider what you stand for. People don't buy products. We know that. They buy brands. Investors don't invest in your company. They actually invest in you individually. So it's really important to make sure that you are as strong as you can be from a social capital perspective to get those unofficial and official investments from individuals. So for today's agenda, we're going to talk about why personal branding is important. What are the benefits? Why personal branding is actually important for companies. Obviously, you have your corporate brand, but why is it important to have strong brands within that company? We're going to look at bonding capital and bridging capital. We're going to look at personal branding post-COVID, and then how to develop and grow your personal brand online. This will be a bit of a whirlwind tour in 20 minutes, as you can imagine, but we're just looking sort of at some high-level key takeaways and deliverables that you can use in your own business and in your own networking. So why is personal branding important? Well, personal branding is more important than ever, specifically for C-suite individuals, but also individuals who are starting out in their careers as well. Many of you, I'm sure, have a LinkedIn profile. A few of you reached out to me on LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn profile, then you have a personal brand. Whether you like it or not, you're out there and people are making judgments about you and your capabilities based on what you have on the internet. And what's important to remember, and I say this to brands all the time, if you don't define your brand, someone else will. Someone else will come up with a reason to think about you in a certain way, and it might not always be to your benefit. It could very well be to your detriment. So you want to choose your own messaging, your own values, your own definition, because if you don't, one of your competitors will. And of course, that might not actually work out for you. If you think about Nike, and we asked Adidas to define what Nike stands for and talk about their reputation, I'm sure it's not going to be completely favorable. And so think about in that way, that you really want to be the one who's owning that messaging. Clearly, Oprah is someone with a very strong personal brand. I'm not saying we're all going to develop into Oprah Winfrey's, but your personal brand is genuinely what differentiates you from others. So first of all, it builds credibility. So your credibility around a specific subject matter, having clear communication, visible confidence, those are often markers of success. So it really does help build your legitimacy and your credibility. It strengthens your network. You get people who will go up to bat for you. These are people who become sort of a large pool of dedicated fans who will advocate for you, advocate for your success, and really invest in you as an individual. It actually also gives you better job stability. And in this climate, obviously, that's something that's unbelievably crucial for many industries. And it helps with client retention. So companies with socially engaged employees, so these are individuals who are active on social media, they actually were 58% more likely to attract other talent to that company. So it really sort of has this ripple effect. If you have an incredible personal brand online, it really does help attract future colleagues as well. And it boosts sales. So 82% of buyers are more willing to place trust in a company when their C-suite is active on social media. If you think of anyone here, if you're on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, you know that that platform is providing you with sort of a behind the scenes lens of that individual. You learn more about that person's identity, and really it's their best foot forward, right? It's your best curated self online. But it actually increases values of trust, notions of trust, because we are trusting individuals if we can sort of see a little bit more than we might be given otherwise through social media. So companies actually need to invest in personal branding initiatives. This is something we've noticed with a lot of the companies that we've been partnering with at King's, is that they really are putting in loads of investments into branding the individuals within that company. So employees at companies that invest in personal branding initiatives are actually 27% more likely to feel optimistic about their company's future, which again, in this climate is vital. 20% are more likely to stay at their company. 40% are more likely to believe that their company is more competitive. And many CEOs actually now have personal branding or thought leadership as a line on his or her budget. So you can see here that really companies are taking this extremely, thinking about this in an extremely strategic way. And we hope that even if your company isn't taking this in a very specific way or in a specific direction, you can do it internally with yourself as well. So actually sales teams often select key sales leaders and invest in their personal brands because of the trust that those brands can foster between the sales leaders and potential clients. So again, this notion of getting new clients or investing in further business initiatives is often strengthened through having a very strong personal brand. Just a few really interesting statistics that I found really do help promote, I would say, the use of social media for your personal brand. So brand messages are reshared 24 times more frequently when posted by an employee versus the brand's sort of corporate media channel, which is another sort of interesting way of adding that individualistic factor to your personal brand. Content shared by employees actually receives 8 times more engagement than content shared by brand channels. So again, you have most of you likely have sort of an in-house PR department, or you outsource it to a big comms firm. And yes, of course, they're sharing brand messages across social media channels in a way that helps spread and disseminate brand messages specifically for different campaigns or for your company. But it's really the content that's shared by employees that we're noticing actually has a lot more traction with individuals. And even if you're looking for jobs, 75% of HR departments are actually required to search job applicants online. So don't you want to make sure that if they're looking up on Google, you're the one providing that information to them and they're not finding other information that obviously is not representative of who you are. Now, a common element when we think of personal branding is networking. And when you think of networking, for me, it's just sort of nails on a chalkboard. It's sort of, it just sounds tacky and gross, and you don't really want to have to embed yourself in these groups that you don't know just to come across as being competitive or opportunistic. And really a way of getting around that stigma of networking is looking at the difference between bonding capital and bridging capital. And a lot of individuals, I don't know you personally, but I can imagine that a lot of you are investing in bonding capital and actually underinvesting in bridging capital. So let's just walk through those two very important concepts. So bonding capital is a type of social capital that describes connections within your group. So people you already know. These are often characterized by high levels of similarity in terms of demographic characteristics, attitudes, available information, ideologies, resources. And actually it exists mainly between people like us, or we're in it together. And these are often people who are family members, close friends, people who live in your neighborhood. And so we tend to sort of focus on investing in those relationships, which again is good, but it's not everything. The key element is really having that balance between both bonding capital and bridging capital. So bridging capital refers to a type of social capital that describes connections that link people across a cleavage that typically divides society. So this includes race, religion, class, and it's really important to sort of bridge networks with the other individuals who aren't necessarily like us, as previously stated here, but people who we will think will add to our network. So it associates that notion that bridging is between communities, groups, and organizations. So in other words, too many people have connections with individuals who are like them. So you work at the same company, you work in the same industry, but we don't really have many connections with people who are dissimilar to us. And I'm not sure why that's happening, but I think it's something people should genuinely strategically try to fix within their own network. So you want to network both inside and outside your organization. Because if you ever leave your organization or you're looking for further opportunities, if you've only networked within your company, then no one's going to know about you or what you can bring to the table. So when only a select group knows about your talents and your abilities, obviously you put yourself in jeopardy, right? Because only a certain very select niche group can actually speak about your successes or anything else that you can bring up in future opportunities. You actually have fewer people who can speak to your contributions, as I said. And if your department is actually reorganized or your company has layoffs, the people who understand your talents actually won't be in a position to help because they either would have been laid off as well or reorganized and you might not see them again in more of a professional capacity. So what we're asking you to do here is to consciously cultivate a broad network so that if your situation changes or if for any reason you need some backup, there are options available to you. So try this from people who you meet through hobbies. If you go to a yoga studio, if you play tennis, if you play football, many relationships of proximity are also a great way to sort of help Find further individuals, so neighbors, parents at your kids' school, friends of friends. Really try to look beyond your initial network that you have internally at your office. Now, another element of personal branding is, of course, first impressions. This is something that we actually can't change. It's how the mind works. And you actually have 10 seconds when you introduce yourself to someone, for them to consider whether you're right for the job or not. So it's not a lot of time, 10 seconds. And so really what's important to consider here is not only are those 10 seconds crucial in terms of how individuals perceive you, but you also have the power of the halo effect in those 10 seconds, and that very, very brief interaction. So the halo effect often, if we're presenting ourselves in person, comes down to style, comes down to attire. And actually, if you have proper attire for an interview or a meeting, you're going to create a halo effect, which means that your client will see you in a positive light, even if you have a few sort of missteps during that period. They'll sort of say, okay, well, no, they clearly are someone who's credible. They just had a little bit of a misstep. And it's that halo effect that really puts you in a more positive light because of genuinely how you're presenting yourself in that first impression. So the psychologist E.L. Thorndike, who does a lot of work in this space, noticed that when an individual is found to have just one desirable trait, that individuals assumed to have other desirable traits as well. Okay, so even if you've just put one foot forward that's very, very positive, very desirable, they're going to assume that the next one is desirable as well. And so again, that halo effect is something that you have complete control over and can actually help build your credibility and build your legitimacy. So we'd like to think that we'd make decisions based on rational evidence. That's sort of something we'd like to say. But in truth, as Bjarne says, the truth is that we actually judge it on how well someone's dressed. Okay, that's unbelievably, what's the word I'm looking for? I think that's sad. It's unfortunate that that's the decision that people often make. But based on the research by Frank Bjarne, that is really what's happening in terms of those first impressions. And how personal style affects you actually shows how people end up seeing you. So in a 2013 study, researchers showed 300 people pictures of two men for 3 seconds each. One man wore a tailored bespoke suit and the other somewhat of an ill-fitting suit off the rack. The man in the bespoke suit was unsurprisingly rated by participants as being more confident, successful, flexible, and actually a higher earner based only on that first impression. Minor clothing manipulations can actually give rise to significantly different inferences. So it's sort of those slight tweaks you can do in the real world offline that can actually affect your personal brand, both online and when you're networking. So your first impression, though, now is virtual. Post-COVID, we're not having a lot of these networking events. We're having interviews on Zoom or on Teams, and it really is a very different experience. So your LinkedIn profile is actually likely to show up in one of the top search results if someone Googles you. That's not very surprising. 62% of Google clicks go to the top 3 search results, with Google, those who start at Google, obviously end up at LinkedIn. So one thing you can do is actually ensure that your LinkedIn profile, that about section, is the most comprehensive bio that you have on the internet, because it's your way of actually creating your brand in a way that no one is gonna question it. It will actually be the most read version of your bio, given that everyone's working from home. And you have 2,600 characters, which actually provides a really great opportunity to tell your story in a very authentic and compelling and engaging way. So make sure that you're sharing not only just information about what you've done professionally, but other things, passions, values, accomplishments, anything that tells the sort of complete story about who you are. Okay, so one final bit here on becoming your own publicist and growing your social media presence. How do you develop this online? So every social media profile is promoting you, right? Whether you like it or not, if you're out there on the internet, someone is talking about you. So what are your profiles saying? Well, you're representing your brand in a very sort of professional manner as well. And we no longer live in a world where our personal profiles are off limits. So if you're putting it out there, people are checking it, but not only that, they're actually judging and evaluating you based on that presence as well. So developing a personal brand on social media is important because it can actually grow with you. So if you switch jobs, start a second business, write a book, each of these milestones will fall under that personal brand, and you can really curate this very specific narrative online through your personal brand by all of these various accomplishments that you upload. So start thinking of yourself as a brand. I know that's something that seems a little bit yeah, a little bit off-putting for a lot of individuals, but really authenticity is key here. You're going to put your best self forward in the most authentic and transparent way. One great thing that I always ask people to do is set up a Google alert for your name, right? So you're really just doing a little bit of an audit, if you will, of your online presence and find out what's being said about you or someone with a similar name to you online. Secure a personal website, even just purchasing a specific URL with your name, even if you don't actually build that website ever, it really is a great way of just owning that user domain name, and so that no one can pick it up and then, of course, carry on your name in a different direction. And find ways to produce value. So find ways to add value to your audience by curating content that's in line with your brand. Be purposeful in what you share. So every tweet you send, every status update you make, every picture you share contributes to your personal brand. So make sure that not only is it purposeful, but it's also quite consistent with that image that you want to bring across to the world. And make sure that you associate with other strong brands. So what we really tell individuals to do is focus on the 3 C's. So company, college, or colleagues. And so maybe there's an alumni newsletter that you can contribute to help grow your brand from your university days, like King's, for example. But really try to associate yourself with strong brands, because that halo effect, of course, will continue with that association. And a strong personal brand is obviously dependent on a strong narrative. So make sure you're telling your story in a way that is compelling, engaging, and really resonates with the audience that you're trying to attract. One thing that's sort of interesting to do finally is making sure that all of your pictures, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, are all the same, right? So there's consistency. Use your headshot from your company on every social media platform that will be public. Just so people know that it's just sort of reassuring to have that same image across. They know it's you the whole time. Develop a tone and a voice that's true to you and your brand, and make sure that you stick with it. And decide what you want to be known for. What is your specialty? Obviously, what are your values? What do you stand for? But professionally, in terms of your credibility and your expertise, what are you known for? What are people going to remember you by? Post regularly across channels that add to your brand. That doesn't mean disseminating everything on every platform that ever existed online or on social media, but choose strategic ones that you think will resonate best with the personal brand that you're trying to create and grow. Engage with your followers. Make sure you're answering any questions, sharing your expertise, and interacting with those who are giving time to interact with you. You don't want to put things out there when people start engaging with you, you just stop. That's worse than actually even not having a social media profile. And show your human side. If you have a dog, you like running or anything along those lines, you enjoy cooking, sort of weave that very strategically into your personal brand online so that people can sort of see this other side of you. And that might be a way for them to connect you in a way that's not as corporate as sort of the corporate homepage with your bio on it. And again, monitor who's talking about you. If there's anyone who you notice is commenting about your work or I don't even know, posting photos about you on Facebook that you don't like or you don't want out there, make sure you're talking to them and you're monitoring what is being put out there by other people. Because as I said earlier, anything that goes online is really there and it's contributing to your brand, whether you like it or not. So it's all about creating a persona and marketing yourself as an expert in the industry, which is why people should trust you and your opinions. So just to recap again, network both inside and outside of your organization, control your narrative, share your ideas publicly. Again, share them publicly in a way that is compelling and strategic to growing your social capital in terms of both within your organization and external to that. So I think we're going to pass it back to Kate now, and we're going to hopefully answer some questions.
Plenty of questions. Don't worry, Gillian. Thank you so much. That was great. I feel like I've got some homework to go and do now after this session. I will be Googling myself immediately. We've got lots of questions actually. Thank you guys. You've been posting things through. So actually a few really nice follow-ons from where you were just finishing up actually. So Claire has asked, are all social media platforms effective or are some more than others? Is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the key thing for that is you have to think of who is your audience. So women over 50 right now, they're the largest growing demographic on Facebook. So everyone who's a woman over 50 is really putting all of their energies into Facebook. If you look at millennials or influencers, obviously Instagram or YouTube are more specific for that. LinkedIn and Twitter are better platforms for professional endeavors, talking about different things you're working on at work or updating your CV. So I think you have to figure out, once you know what your brand is, who do you want to learn about it? If you want women over 50 to learn about it, for example, then put it on Facebook. If you're trying to attract a younger demographic in terms of brand relationships, maybe Instagram. If you want to show that you're an expert in a space, I think Twitter is the best way of doing that. A lot of people, when they say they're active on Twitter, they're not really, they're just scrolling through to read the news. So why not have your information, in that news feed, if you will, to sort of help include that expertise as part of your credibility.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Really interesting. And I guess a follow on from that as well, Metin's asked, are there some features for level or content of communication with your audience when it comes to personal branding?
In terms of the frequency, is that sort of?
It's not clear actually. So I don't know whether that's if there's any sort of, I suppose you've given us some, haven't you, sort of best practice or top tips, I suppose, around maybe frequency and content.
Yeah, I think the key thing is it's all about managing expectations. So once you have a profile and people are looking at it, engaging with it, you have to continue to publish, no question, but you can't do it in a way that people get overwhelmed and it's just too much information and they stop following you. So rule of thumb, I would say, is once a day, or minimum 3 times a week. So I would not post more than once a day, of course, unless you're, the news, like, you're breaking news, like you work for the BBC or something like that. I would post once a day or 3 times a week. It's just really important to make sure that you're not taking advantage of this captive audience that's there. So they feel that they're just there to just absorb information, not really interact with you. So I think that's something that's really key to remember is you don't want to overdo it, but you also want to be frequent enough that people know that you're engaging and you're listening and you want to sort of share with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Thank you. And a little bit different actually, although maybe relevant for a few people actually. So someone on the chat has said, I've decided to take a career break so that they can take a rest and consider next steps, but how do I represent this online, for instance, on LinkedIn and others?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of women have that when they take maternity leave. I know I had 2 maternity leaves and I had so many conversations with colleagues and with myself, and does that actually go on my CV or how do I do it? I didn't put it on my CV. I sort of bring it up in interviews if people ask, but if you're taking a career break, that doesn't mean you're just sitting at home, twiddling your thumbs. If you start doing any volunteering, absolutely, please put that on your CV. If you learn a new skill online, there's so many courses you can do online in terms of even learning how to code, learning a new language. Definitely make sure that you're doing something active, even if it's not related specifically to your career. But I think that'll just show that you took time off to do something in a really productive way, which obviously is often celebrated by a lot of companies.
That makes sense. And I guess maybe sort of a bit of a link, but linked to that as well. Linda said she got married 2 years ago and changed her last name. How does she make sure that her professional network still recognizes me? Any thoughts on that one? It's not a unique problem, is it?
No, not a unique problem at all. And a lot of people struggle with that. So an option you can do is put it, it sounds so trivial or simple, but just putting it in parentheses at the end of your profile, just until enough people sort of gain traction in terms of understanding that you've changed your name. Also sending out an email to your network. I've seen a lot of people do that when they've changed their name after they got married. Because you sort of will get an email and be like, I have no idea who this is. And then you'll read it like, oh, you changed your name. That's great. So I think that's another way of doing it. Just letting people know that that's in fact happened, but that's not unusual. No, not at all.
That makes sense. So I think moving over to you talked about the bridging type of networking. So someone's asked, what are some of the most common mistakes when networking in the bridging type of network, other than how you dress, which I think has been noted by a couple of people.
Yeah, it's so funny. I hate talking about how you dress because I think it's something that seems so superficial, but I bring it up because that's how people judge us. So yeah, as much as we don't like to talk about it, it's something that's happening for good or for better or for worse. But in terms of bridging capital and how do you build that a little bit more, don't set out to network. Don't set out to sort of go out and be like, I'm gonna, get 4 contacts today on LinkedIn when I drop my kid off at school or anything like that. I think that what I've done, to be honest, is just listen initially, to sort of find out what people are doing and sort of think, okay, well, that's kind of that might be an interesting opportunity, or that's sort of something that I do, or I really just like talking to that person. They're really interesting and they have something that I think someone I would like to talk to and I feel compelled by. The bridging capital, I would say, takes longer to develop. You do have to sort of invest in it longer. but they are often more authentic because there's no reason that this person has to hang out with you or be with you because you work at the same company. If they're showing interest in what you do, or they want to help you out in a specific way, they're doing it because they genuinely want to. So I think I would say those ones are often more fruitful, but they do take longer to invest in. I know even just personally, when I'm trying to get guest speakers for my course, for any of the courses that I teach, they're all from bridging connections. They're from no one internal because I want people from industry, but they're ones that have taken time to foster and to develop a rapport with. So I would say commit to it, but just know that it's a little bit of a longer road. But it is, I think, more useful actually.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. And a really nice question actually from Alex. So Alex has said, what practical advice or first steps do you give to mentees or clients who want to identify their values and develop their understanding of their values before then using that to develop their brand? Do you have any thoughts on that bit?
Yeah, that's something I'm teaching in a couple of weeks actually at King's for a client. The key thing is what I'm going to have these individuals do is write down what they think they stand for, and then have someone write down a list of what they think that person stands for. So you're going to come out with what you think you stand for and your perception, and see what links up. Hopefully a couple of things link up. If not, that's a bigger conversation. But I think at that point, it's really figuring out what people perceive you as, what are your values. And the problem when you hear the word values, it's such a loaded term. It's like, I believe in equality, yes, and diversity, yes, 100%. But go further down, like how specific can you be? So I think that's something that people have to really sort of take into account, and then see how other people perceive them. Have coffee with a few mentors or colleagues and say, if a job came up, why would you consider me? And like, what heuristic would you put with me? What would you consider are my strengths or my weaknesses? And then trying to develop it that way. But that takes a bit of, I think it takes time and effort, not years, but you definitely have to sit down and be strategic about what you stand for. But then making sure that resonates or is synonymous with what people think of you as well.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting question here, actually, I think, from Craig. So he said, is there a danger that graduates and generation, I think it's Y and Z, he's saying Y2 and Z, consider themselves greater than the brand of an employer and focus on their own brand as opposed to the company brand? Have you got any evidence or thoughts on that one?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. And when I'm not teaching exec courses, my research is on influencer marketing. So I look at, those YouTube influencers who have their own personal brand, but are then also promoting Cadbury or COS or Sephora, you name it. And that's something that, it has to be balanced perfectly, right? You don't want your brand to outshine the corporate brand, right? Because they're, at the end of the day, they're paying you, they're paying you. You need to keep the lights on as well at home. So I think the key there is having a balance and not thinking of your personal brand as your ego. And I think that's something that happens a lot with younger generations, is they sort of conflate the two. They have their ego about everything I can do. Look how many followers I have. That's my brand. That's not really, unless you're an influencer and you're getting paid to do that, to have followers, that's a very unique demographic. Don't confuse the two. So your personal brand is not what you create, it's sort of what you stand for. And I think that's something that people really need to understand. And at the end of the day, remember, you're part of a team. If you work for Nike or Google, you don't outshine their brand, because at the end of the day, you're part of that network and that team as well. So it's something that I know a lot of influencers and a lot of brands are struggling with currently. They don't want to hire, like Unilever doesn't want to hire an influencer who is going to overshadow a new toothpaste or a new shampoo. But I think it's separating your brand from your ego, which is something that I think is so important, or else you're just going to come across as very opportunistic, a little bit conceited, and so you just have to be a little bit careful there.
Yeah, interesting. It feels like that's going to be an interesting area to watch, doesn't it? Craig saying thank you for that answer. And another question, I think it's Roleka, sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing the name here, I apologize, saying, I appreciate you work in qualitative research, but what metrics would you use to measure the success of a personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So even though I was trained as an ethnographer, I still do work at mixed methods work with quantitative work. So to measure personal metrics for personal brand success, I would look at engagement rates. So I would see how many people are following you, how many of those followers are new followers, when are they following you, What's the level of engagement you have with them? So are they commenting on photos or on posts? Is there a rapport that's going on there? And then again, one thing to keep in mind is it's not really a numbers game. You want quality over quantity in terms of people who are engaging with your brand online. So don't assume that just because you have 1,000, LinkedIn friends or something, that means something. It doesn't if you're not engaging with them, or if they're not seeing what you post, if you're not posting. So there's an art and a science to building your personal brand. Obviously, the science element is making sure that you have the numbers to sort of show a bit of credibility, but those numbers mean absolutely nothing if you're not engaging with them or sharing content that they think resonates with them and that they're resharing, for example, or reposting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've got loads of questions actually, so I apologize in advance because we're probably not going to get to all of them, but I'll try and pick a couple more out just to give a flavour, if that's all right with Gillian. So interesting question from Metin. Can you give some examples of world leaders where personal branding works great or where it works really badly? And do you have any tips for those people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really good question. I think that even though I'm Canadian, I think that Justin Trudeau is doing a very good job on social media. What I think he does well, regardless of his politics, is the balance between personal and professional. So when he was working from home during COVID, it was him in his house, which it wasn't, the big sort of palatial thing that people think of when they think of a prime minister, but it was him literally with pictures of his kids, on his desk and artwork. And I think his kid ran through, a Zoom call like everyone is used to now. So I think he's doing an incredible job of balancing personal and professional. He's a father, and so I think that maybe he feels he can do that a little bit more openly. But I think that's something that's great for personal and professional. Who else do I think does a great job? I think the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Will and Kate, I think they do a wonderful job on social media, actually. It's a load of behind the scenes content. They show a lot of people who they engage with. So it's not just, look what I did today. It's look what these kids at school did today or what we did with them. So the focus I find is off them. They don't actually focus on, them as this, royal power couple. They're looking at the work that they're doing. And I think that's a really strategic way as well to talk about what they stand for by showing and not just telling people. And I think show, don't tell is such an important thing for people to remember when they're building their brand. Show us what you stand for. Don't just type it up and tell us about it. And I think they're doing a really great job, having that balance.
Yeah. Thank you. I totally agree. Actually, I follow those guys, and I'm always very impressed. I know exactly what you mean. It's really rich, isn't it? What they do. Yeah,
it's impressive. Yeah, they don't have, they're going to have a following because they're interesting, but they don't have to do such a great job.
They do a good job with it. Yeah. Thank you. So I think maybe perhaps we'll just try and take one, maybe two more. So I'm just scanning through. Sorry, Gillian, just to check I'm capturing everything. We've had a question about what's the best way to re-engage on your social channels. So if you haven't been posting for a while, and they've actually said specifically LinkedIn, which has come up in a few questions, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, that's a really great way. That's fantastic. What I would do personally is try to find an interesting article that you see people have either previously engaged with or sort of very topical. So something maybe from HBR, so Harvard Business Review, or Sloan School of Management, or CNN, or BBC, or Forbes, or I don't know, think of a really credible news source, and post it, share it on LinkedIn, and put it, maybe even like ask a question. And so your followers can start engaging. And even if no one starts writing questions, but they're saying they like it, or they repost it, or they reshare it, that's a good first step. But I think taking that news route is great because everyone loves talking about, not salacious, but interesting things in the press. And I think that's a really great avenue to get people re-energized and re-engaged with your profile.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then actually we've had a few sort of quite technical questions. So I don't know how far you want to dive into these, but kind of best times of day to post, and again, people have said LinkedIn. I think probably that's coming to the fore here as the professional network, but and any good platforms for web pages and things like that. So I don't know how far you want to dive into those, or if you've got any final
sure
tips.
I guess more logistical questions, which makes sense. Key deliverables. I would likely not post on LinkedIn on the weekend. If people have kids, I have 2 young kids, and I try not to be on my phone on the weekend. and I know a lot of people are, it's hard, but I know a lot of people are trying to do that. So I wouldn't post anything that you want people to really see on the weekend. Monday morning is really great. The mornings are good because when people are waiting for their coffee, you know, at any coffee shop, they're scrolling through and they'll come across it. Lunchtime as well, for a lot of companies that get a proper, you know, lunch break. That's another opportunity for people to, when thinking of when people scroll through. But I would try from Friday at 5, you know, until Monday at 8. I would not, you know, maybe put an interesting article up, but don't expect much engagement. And if you do, don't assume it's going to always be like that, because the weekends are so unpredictable with anyone, kids or no kids. So I think your time is very precious during that time, and you don't want to capitalize on that sort of precious non-working time. And then in terms of sort of websites, so I used GoDaddy.com. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's cheap. I think it was like £5. It was when I lived in the US. I think it was $5 a month or $2 a month. And I don't even have a website, but I own that URL. And that was sort of what at the time I had a website, and then, you know, life got ahead of me and it, you know, got very busy. But even if you just own that URL, no one is going to own it and, you know, develop your brand without you. So just looking at websites like that. And there's so many things that have developed in terms of various platforms and courses, even on YouTube, or through a lot of startup companies. I know in East London, they do loads of like website building and things like that. But oh yeah, Namecheap, I see that as well. Yeah, Namecheap as well from Diana is a good option as well. So just try to secure that name, just so you just want to own that. You don't want someone, even if they have the best intentions, you just want people, if they Google your name, you know, for what you've presented, to come up.
Yeah, to have some control. Perfect. I think if it's all right, Gillian, we're going to finish with one final question. So
Sure.
we've you've kind of spoken a bit about this already, but how do you develop a brand post-COVID when you're not in the office? Have you got any sort of final thoughts for everyone on that one?
Yeah, that's sort of the key. It's a $1 million question, £1 million question. How do you develop a brand offline? Online when you're not offline. I think that makes sense. I would go back to what I said earlier about LinkedIn. I think setting up a few interesting articles, maybe that even are COVID related. There's so many studies now that are coming out about, you know, working from home is really productive, or unlimited holidays make people work harder, or, you know, something like that. Find some catchy headline that everyone is talking about now on every possible website, and post that, because at least it's topical. People will want to engage with it because everyone has their own opinion on working from home. And then maybe you'll notice, as people are engaging and writing questions or saying comments underneath that article, there's people who feel the same as you do about it, or are also looking for a job. And then you can connect them separately, you know, on another platform or just through messaging. But you just want to get attention. You just want to grab attention in the most professional, strategic way. And I think, writing about COVID and working conditions, I think, is something that everyone will talk about.
Everyone's got a view on that at the moment.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gillian. That's really helpful. I apologize to everyone. We didn't manage to get to all the questions today, but I think there are a few in there, and I think hopefully we've covered the range of things that came up. So I'm sure if there are any further ones, we can try and pull them out. Lots of thank yous coming through as well, in the chat as well for all your great answers, Gillian. So I'll share that to you as well. So just to really briefly finish us up, what I was going to do actually is just hijack just for a moment, because what we wanted to do is just let you guys know a little bit about something that we're doing at the business school, which I think some of you should be aware of actually, because we've talked to you about this before, and hopefully you've seen as well. So perhaps, Gillian, you can tell me if that is showing. Is that those slides there? Perfect.
Looks great.
Gillian, as I mentioned earlier, actually is very involved in executive education, which is wonderful, and that's the area that I work in, and we're really glad about that, because she's, as you can tell, super experienced and has a lot to share, and has been doing all sorts of great sessions for us. So I think it's fair to say that executive education is probably maybe the newest area of activity at the business school. We've been around for a couple of years now, but we're very established around our degrees, but we've been really building up our presence in the last few years around executive education. And the rationale for that, of course, is that we know that people learn for life, and so we want to kind of support you all through your careers as you develop. So when you leave King's, we don't want you to properly leave King's. We want you to come back and engage with us further, and you do that through activities like this, but obviously we can also hopefully support you in other ways as well. So we provide short courses for individuals and businesses, and practical and relevant learning. And as I said, Gillian's been involved in doing some of that with us as well. And actually, the really nice thing about executive education, I think, is that it's also a way of stepping away from work and just having a few days or a few sessions online, if it's a virtual course, just to actually really reflect and think about what you're doing, and maybe spend a bit of time on some of the things. Again, as Gillian's mentioned, some of this takes a bit of thought and thinking and time. So it's a way of doing that. So we have this offering at the business school. And what I just wanted to do was just flash up briefly some of the upcoming things that we're doing through 2022 that may be of interest to you or colleagues or groups that you work with, so that you know that they're here. We've been building a few really nice new things in the last couple of years that maybe we've not managed to tell you about. So we have a fantastic course coming up in March called Leading with EQ, which is led by Dr. Ali Budgeon of Channing. And that focuses on some really interesting things. It's really around teamwork. So building your own personal resilience, but also the resilience of your team, managing maybe conflict within the team, but also high performing teams and how to build them and get people working together. And it touches a bit on communication skills as well. So I think really relevant basically for anyone, actually. I think we all find ourselves in a situation where we're working both with other people and perhaps in stressful situations ourselves. And that course will cover both of those. More related perhaps to Gillian's pure area of interest, although she's so broad, is strategic marketing, which is happening in April. And that's a course for anyone really that has an element of marketing in their role or marketing responsibility, or maybe works with the teams that have marketing responsibility. And we'll focus on very much kind of what marketing looks like now and where it's going in the future. So very much about kind of future marketing. So you can see real resonance with some of the things that Gillian's talked about today. So, pieces around kind of influencer marketing, and very much kind of where's it going and how can you help your organization get into that and ride with that and get ahead. Number 3 here, we've launched a new course called Building Gender Inclusive Workplaces, and actually Gillian was great in helping us formulate some of the thinking around this. We're really excited to launch this with the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's. So it starts in May, and it's actually a 9-month blended program. So you do pieces and go away and work on a change project of your own, and then come back and kind of reassess around that. And it's very much about fixing the systems that stop gender inclusion at work, as opposed to fixing women. We feel quite strongly about this at King's. We don't think that this is about just making women more male or more confident or more active. It's about making sure that work is an inclusive place for everyone. We'd love to have some spin-offs for other kinds of inclusion in the future, but for now we are launching the gender inclusion piece, and we've got some fantastic speakers on that, and a really nice course that will look at how you kind of build that systemic change into an organization and adopt that into your own leadership styles as well. And finally, the business of healthy aging. Last but not least, Gillian is a co-director on this course, I'm happy to say. So if you'd like to dive more into this topic, I'd encourage you to do that as well. Again, starts in May. It will be hopefully in person at King's. And you heard Gillian actually mention earlier the rapidly expanding group of people who are the older demographic across the world, actually. And there are tremendous business opportunities with that, but also some challenges. And you heard Gillian talk earlier about the exploding over 50s on Facebook, and how you leverage that marketing piece, and that features in this course. So it's really about how businesses can really think about the opportunities and challenges of this aging. I hate using the word aging, it sounds really negative, but it's the older demographic that we're seeing around the world now, and actually how we can help that age group stay healthier for longer, live a real great quality of life, but also the fact that people are, how do we make the most of that and kind of serve that community really well. So all of these have information on the website, the King's Business School website. So please do check it out if you're interested in any of them. And we're obviously really happy to chat to you about them as well. And just finally on that point, I think you will be aware that there is an alumni saving. So if any of these courses resonate for you, we really want to welcome you back. So I hope you'll check those out. And we also do savings for groups and corporate partnerships and scholarships. So if you have a group of people at a company or a team that you're really interested in working with, then please let us know. We also do tailored work as well. Gillian's been involved in some of that. So if you have, if there's something here that's piqued your interest, or you think that actually something we're thinking about might be really helpful for you or your organization or your team, please do get in contact with us. We're very happy just to have an informal chat with you about kind of what you're trying to achieve and where we might be able to kind of pull together expertise or help you. So there's an email address there, execed-business@kcr.ac.uk, but you can also find everything to do with the contact details on our website, and you'll come through to Michelle and Lucky in our team who are super experienced and really, really helpful, and will be able to work with you to discuss what you might be wanting to do, both at a personal level and perhaps at an organizational level, and then we'll be able to work with you there. So I'm going to stop sharing that now, because I just wanted to just make sure that we told you about these. So let me find my stop share button. But I'm going to bring us to a close, I think, if that's okay. Gillian, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to finish up with as well. Thank you so much. I can see massive thanks in the chat. So.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. No, come join us. We can talk more on any of these subjects, and anything bespoke as well that we can tailor for you guys.
No, it's brilliant. Enlightening session, interesting and practical, insightful. Please organise more. So I think safe to say, Vanilla, some clapping emojis. There you go. You've had everything. So, well, thank you, Gillian, for giving up your time. I know that it's been really, really, really interesting. You can see that from everything here. And actually, thank you to everyone who's attended as well. I know it's hard to find a bit of time in the day to join us, but we're lucky to have such a brilliantly engaged alumni community, which is wonderful. And thank you for all your questions. It always makes it much more fun, doesn't it, Gillian, for us?
Absolutely.
There's
great engagement.
We really appreciate it. So I think probably bring things to a close. Just to say then, if you've got any questions about today's webinar or anything about alumni relations at King's, you can email forever@kcl.ac.uk, and that will bring you through to the alumni team, so to Gina and her team who've organised this brilliant event. So thank you, Gina, as well for that. So forever@kcl.ac.uk if you've got anything that you want to contact us all about, and we can share out the information as well on the website around executive education if anyone's interested in that, or feel free to email the alumni team and they'll just pop you straight through to us. So yeah, I think that probably brings us to a close. I don't know if you want to say any final closing notes, Gillian. It's probably everything to be said, isn't it?
Everything's been said. Just be strategic. People are going to talk about you online, so you might as well make sure they're talking about you in a great way, a way that you've curated it.
I suspect everyone is going to be logging off now and Googling and looking at their LinkedIn. Yes, if we've got 5 minutes of homework for everyone, that's what it should be.
So true. Start with that. That's smart. Good call. Thank you, everyone, so much. It's great talking to you.